Well, it's Holy Week leading into Easter, and God is making headlines, and at least his 10 commandments are. So when I talk about the real story, I'm talking about the real story. The headlines are interesting about this. Here's one. Arkansas advances bill to display 10 commandments in schools. Texas Senate passes bill to put 10 commandments in public school classrooms. Missouri bill seeks mandatory 10 commandments in classrooms, sparking debate. New Republic, the right wing's new plot to force the 10 commandments on school kids. And of course, where shalt thou watch the 10 commandments on ABC during Easter and Passover 2025. Look, this is not about Charlton Heston. The debate over the 10 commandments in classrooms is a big deal, and we have debates about some things that don't seem like they're great fodder for debate, like the Pledge of Allegiance, prayer, the 10 commandments. Just doesn't seem to me like there's a lot to debate about that. There are 16 states currently pursuing bills to require the 10 commandments in classrooms. Now, is this news to you? Well, I suspect it may be, because mainstream media, news and entertainment, well, they just don't like to talk about religion. I can remember way back in the first or second season of Dr. Phil, a network executive at CBS approached me when I said something about being a Christian and mentioned, we don't really talk about that on the air. And I said, really? Well, we don't own the Dr. Phil show. I own the Dr. Phil show. And so I do talk about it when it's appropriate. They just seem to kind of bash it like it's just not, stylish or avant-garde. Golden Globe Awards. Nikki Glaser mocked God. I know Nikki. I think she's just kind of doing a bit because she's a really good egg. Here's what she had to say.
Moms are holding strong with 3 shout-outs. God, creator of the universe, 0 mentions.
She then put on a bishop's hat.
Popular, you're gonna be popular.
2023, Jen Psaki attacked House Speaker Mike Johnson for being Christian.
You heard that right. The Bible doesn't just inform his worldview, it is his worldview. In fact, during his first speech in his new job, Johnson suggested that his election as Speaker was an act of God.
Last summer on MSNBC, former Politico reporter Heidi Brisbella took a shot at Americans of faith.
They believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God.
It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. She argues justice, morality is man-made. It doesn't stem from faith, religion, or God. Now, okay, not everyone believes God gave the 10 Commandments 3,000 years before the birth of America. Look at American history. The Founding Fathers wanted separation of church and state, but they felt that religion was essential. They said we want separation. They didn't want to ignore it. They said it's there, we want separation. Quote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Then John Adams, quote, our Constitution was made only for moral and religious people. Here's another little clue. In God we trust. Now in 1964, we added to U.S. currency, in God we trust. 1956, Congress made it official, the official motto of the United States. Then the inscription on the Liberty Bell, Leviticus, proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. And then the oath of office.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Ever listen to the United States Supreme Court being convened? God save the United States and this honorable court. This brings us back to law and order and the 10 Commandments. Louisiana, last June, was the first state to mandate 10 Commandments being displayed in public schools. Now, a federal judge blocked that in November. It's now before the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Alabama are among the 16 states with 10 commandment bills. Like I said, doesn't seem like a great subject for debate, but it is. And there are arguments pro and con. Now, here are the arguments against that I hear people coming up with. Separation of church and state. Texas Senator Sarah Eckhart, Democratic from Austin, said, most Texans are religious, but don't even want their religion crammed down their throat by their government. Okay, she's kind of conflating a couple of things there. Nobody wants anything crammed down their throat by their government, but is having the 10 Commandments available in school cramming it down your throat? I don't really think so, but nonetheless, that's one of their arguments. Another argument against it is it's not inclusive. 10 Commandments, religious texts may not include all students and all beliefs. Displaying the 10 Commandments could lead to religious indoctrination. Another argument against it is it's not appropriate for young children. Carolyn Ansell, an interfaith minister, asked these questions in an op-ed. How do we teach first graders about adultery? Must children being abused by a parent respect that parent? And thirdly, how do we seriously exhort 8th grade boys to, quote, not covet their neighbor's ass? Okay, now you can hear those arguments, think about them, decide if you think they're putting too fine a point on it, and if they're serious enough arguments for precluding making the 10 Commandments available in schools. And it comes down, I guess, to are we making them available or are we cramming them down students' throats? That's what I was saying about the Pledge of Allegiance. If we have the Pledge of Allegiance and you're in homeroom in the 3rd grade and students stand up and say, I pledge allegiance, blah, 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 is that cramming it down their throats? Or is it a ritual that they go through and it becomes part of their memory, part of their history of being in school? Now, there are arguments for the foundation of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam seems to be based on the 10 Commandments. The fact that these are not suggestions, that they are commandments, bring a certain degree of order. And objectivity versus relativity can be important for people that need guidelines, need structure. If society stops functioning, we don't have order. And these 10 Commandments are very clear, and it's important if you look at these as not guidelines, but absolutes. Don't murder. What happens when society creates its own rules? Well, let's look back to the Roman gladiators, Nazi Germany, current times, Middle East extremists and terrorists. Look at the commandment about stealing. When society creates its own rules and plays God, you start getting a point of view that is relative. It's not absolute, it's relative. And nearly 1/4 of American adults have shoplifted, according to LendingTree. 4% say it's always acceptable. 19% say it can be acceptable under certain circumstances. Now, think about that. That's like 1 in 5 people say that it can be acceptable. 46% of Gen Z and millennials who admit stealing see stealing from businesses as a form of consumer advocacy. Okay, now we've got to stop here for a minute. 46% of young people see stealing as a form of consumer advocacy. When I read that, when you hear that, you've got to say, okay, we need some absolutes here. When you're making stealing relative and you're redefining it as consumer advocacy, somebody has lost their ever-loving mind. There was an op-ed in the Hofstra University Chronicle. The right and wrong of shoplifting doesn't come from what you're stealing or how much you're stealing, but who you're stealing from. Are you kidding me? You shouldn't shoplift from local markets and small businesses that are just trying to make a living. But the mega franchises and superstores are fair game. These companies don't care about you, only your pockets. So why should you care about their profit margins? Oh my God. And I say God because we're talking about God. I could spend the next 2 hours telling you why that is absolute lunacy. Every time you steal from a mega franchise, every consumer in America picks up the tab. Every time you steal from a big box store, from a mega franchise, that rolls into the price of what every American pays for everything they buy. It rolls into the cost. That doesn't get eaten up by the mega franchisor. They pass it right on to you and me and everybody that looks like you and me. How naive and self-serving is that bunch of idiocy? Adultery. More than half Americans in monogamous relationships say they have been cheated on, either physically, emotionally, or both. How about just plain general dishonesty? 28% of U.S. voters would engage in at least one kind of illegal voting practice to help their candidate win. 83% of Americans rate moral values in the U.S. as fair or poor. No kidding. What about the first and second commandments? Very religious. First commandment, I am the Lord your God. It's definitive. It does not change. It doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter how well the economy's going. It doesn't matter what kind of justification you have. Right is right, wrong is wrong. There is no moral relativity. The second commandment, you shall have no other gods besides me. Don't worship false gods of social media, money, celebrities. Don't worship politicians, power, lust, money. Don't let media lead you to believe Americans don't care about religion. A new Pew study said that 49% of Americans say a religious text should influence national laws at least a fair amount. 72% of Americans say religion helps society, and there is evidence that that is true. Religion encourages tolerance. Almost 2/3 of Americans acknowledge that. 64% say the president should stand up for people with religious beliefs. So, what's the conclusion here? Make your own decision. Decide what you think about the Ten Commandments in schools, but don't let the media make it for you by spinning it, withholding it, misdirecting it. And don't attack on faith. I studied the Bible. I didn't take things at face value or for granted. I looked at it, weighed it, looked at what would be the alternative. Look, you can't change what you don't acknowledge, so you have to at least say, okay, if I look at the absolutes, where does that lead? If I look at it as relative, where does that lead? We just took a look at what happens if you say, well, it's relative. It depends on who you're stealing from. It depends on a lot of things. No, it doesn't. Right is right and wrong is wrong. You have to be critical thinkers. Drawing closer to God gives you the opportunity and motivation to acknowledge the things about yourself that you wish you could change. And look, there have been a lot of studies about spirituality, being active in religion, being still and listening for God, and psychological well-being. And adults who attend religious services, at least monthly, as adolescents, have a higher chance of growing up to be happier, more peaceful, better adjusted as adults. There's a definite degree of community. It brings people together. When you stop your lives and you go to a house of worship and you have commonality, even if it's just for a few hours, a day a week, it creates a bond. It creates a fellowship. It creates a commonality. And in this fast-paced world, don't we need that? I'll let you decide. And whatever you decide for you and your family, that will be the real story. Wherever you're getting the real story, make sure you subscribe and follow. I'll see you Monday. Tax season is here, and while it might not be the most exciting time of the year, it is also a great opportunity to make smart money moves. If your credit is under 600, you could jump 84 points with on-time payments. If you need to boost your credit fast, Kickoff can help. Start building credit immediately with your first month free with our special tax season promo. Tax season is the perfect time to take control of your financial future. For a limited time only, get your first month free at getkickoff.com/Phil. That's PHIL. Don't wait. That's Kickoff without the C. Get your first month free at getkickoff.com/Phil.
Must sign up via getkickoff.com/Phil to activate offer. Offer applies to new customers first month only. Individual results may vary. Subject to approval. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions may apply. Kickoff credit service starts at $5 a month for 12 months. Average first year credit score impact is plus 84 points. Vantage score 3.0. Between January of 2023 and January of 2024. For Kickoff credit account users who started with a score below 600, who paid on time, and who had no delinquencies or collections added to their credit profile during the period. Late payments may negatively impact your credit score.